One of the biggest things that the most successful athletes, think of people like Kobe Bryant, John Jones, Conor McGregor, Tom Brady, Michael Phelps, and entrepreneurs like Steve Jobs, Elon Musk, as even the smaller ones like Alex Ramosi, who's still quite big, right? What do a lot of them have in common? One of the biggest things that they have in common is the ability to be able to channel their darkest thoughts to be able to win. And in this video, I want to teach you how you can do the exact same thing, how I've done it for myself, and also some potential drawbacks that you may find if you use this type of motivation to get you to where you want to get to. So with that, I want to explain to you how you can channel this type of motivation, this type of, your dark thoughts in a way, to succeed. Right? So this type of motivation, there's two types, but this type is called push motivation. Push motivation is driven by things like hatred, vengeance, insecurity. Something that push motivation is driven also by, it puts other people in the driver's seat. And this is what I mean by that. You're trying to prove something to someone. When you were in 5th grade, the teacher told you were never going to amount to anything. When you broke up with your girlfriend, she was like, you're stupid, you're dumb, you're going to always fail. Your parents never believed in you. The kid who was in your 5th grade class bullied you, and now you want to be successful, right? It puts other people, you're trying to prove them wrong in a way, right? So you make a story of an enemy or an antagonist. Forgive my spelling. To combat that, then you think of things like, oh, when I'm famous, when I'm successful, when I have 1 million followers, when I have this and that, right? So you start thinking, I'm going to win by having status. So cars, money, right? Fame is another one. And so instead of being driven to something, you're driven away from something, right? And you're also driven away from pain. You're driven away from things like rejection. You're driven away from things, like I mentioned above, like insecurity. And so you have fear of going back to where you were, and you never want to be there again, right? Maybe your household was horrible and you never want to be there again, right? And so usually people in this bucket say things like, I have to prove them wrong, or I'm going to show them I'm not a failure. The best way for me to explain my personal experience with this is when I was 19, a few years back, many moons ago when I was in college, I liked this girl, and she was like my high school sweetheart kind of thing, and we had dated for 2 years at that time, and I was a sophomore, and we ended up breaking up. And this is the girl in my mind who I thought I was going to marry. And as Andrew Huberman says in one of his podcasts, he explains that breakups are very, very hard on men, especially young men who haven't gone through heartbreak, because in our minds, the world is essentially shutting down, and the brain reacts in a very similar fashion to someone essentially dying, right? Because they're disappearing from space and time, is how he describes it. And I can definitely relate to that. I think that breakup was a very, very, very hard time for me, for little Danny at 19 years old. Even though I'm not much older now, but it was still really tough. I didn't really understand how the world worked at the time. And so that took me through some very, very deep rabbit holes at the time. And it was basically at the time when Andrew Tate was starting to pop off and different things, right? And at that point, I became so filled with hatred and vengeance, and not really vengeance, I'm trying to make it sound like Batman here, but I was filled with a lot of dark motivation to basically want to prove someone wrong. And with that, I started going to the gym and I started to do exercise, and I went from being like 145 pounds at 5'11" to then putting on like 30 pounds of lean mass in about 2 years after that, right? But that was all to try to get somebody back. That was all to try to prove somebody wrong. And although it was very beneficial and it got me to, one of my first goals I had set out, it definitely had some drawbacks. But after that, 2-3 years, I kept on, in college, trying different business things, and I was like, I want to be successful, I want to be an entrepreneur. So now I graduate college, and 2-3 months after that, I'm like, I want to do something with my life. I don't want to work a 9 to 5. My mom is telling me to get a job. My dad's telling me, hey, just listen to your mom kind of thing. My dad's super chill. My mom was like, hey, you got to get a job. At least this is the backup, because I believe in you, but I still want you to get a job meanwhile, kind of thing. So you can have health insurance, so you can have your 401k, whatever. And I was like, I don't really know if I want that. I'm not saying it's wrong, I'm just not sure if it was for me. And so then my mom comes into my room, she's like, hey, you gotta well, how's the job search going? I'm like, Mom, I don't think I want to get a job. She's like, what? I'm like, yeah, I think I actually want to start a business. I want to be an entrepreneur. Like, I want to figure things out on my own. And she was like, yeah, no. And I was like, but I thought you believed in me. She's like, I do, but I want you still to have a job so you can find a girl to marry, yada, yada, yada. And I was like, it doesn't really sound like you believe in me. She's like, I'm just being realistic. I'm like, yeah, that's what people say. And we started getting into a really, really heated argument. And she was like, how are you going to succeed in business? With what money? Whatever. And I was like, I think I can do it. And it was very hurtful for me because, you know, I believe my parents loved me and they wanted the best for me and they didn't believe in me. Then I felt the same feeling I had when I broke up with the girlfriend that I was dating in college, which is I just want to prove them wrong, or they're going to see they made a mistake in a way. And so later that evening, I went into my mom's room and I was like, hey, Mom, Dad, this is going to be the last week I'm living here. I spoke to some friends. I'm going to be moving in with them, which is where I'm at now. And I want to try to figure out starting a business and living on my own and not getting a job. And hey, if I fail, I much rather live under a bridge pursuing my dreams than having never tried. They fought, they cried, and they're like, okay. Like, I wasn't gonna ask for the permission. I just wanted to prove them wrong. I just had so much hate in my heart, basically like, dang, you don't believe in me? I'm just gonna figure it out myself. And so then I went out 2-3 months later. I ended up actually successfully buying a business. I come back and I get my phone to call someone, to call my parents and let them know the success that I've had, the small success. And I realized that I couldn't call them because they were the antagonist. They were the enemy. They were the person that I was trying to prove wrong. And so I felt they weren't rooting for me. I felt they were rooting against me. And so why would I call them now? And so this type of motivation is a motivation that I've had to really break out of plateaus and break out of the uncomfortable. And so if you want to channel this kind of motivation, I'm not saying it's wrong. I'm not saying it's bad. I'm saying if you want to do this, you have to find an enemy. You have to find someone who you're fighting against, okay? This is very common in language that's used to persuade crowds, to sell in business, okay? And you always want to get your audience, your troops, your people against one common enemy. And you want to be pushing everyone against that, right? That's been done since the beginning of time. From people like Julius Caesar, Hannibal, Alexander the Great, right? They would put it against their enemy. People that just do marketing and say, hey, we're not going to be like this company, like this sort of brand, like this. We're like this, right? They're horrible. They're bad. And so if you want to channel this kind of energy, you have to find an antagonist. You have to find somebody who you're fighting against, right? Who's the enemy, the person you're trying to fight? Once you find that person, that thing, that company, whoever it is, you want to be able to persuade everyone around you, yourself first, to fight against that force, to fight against those people, right? Hitler did it as well. Hitler, for him, the people that he was fighting against, the antagonists, were the Jews, right? And he was able to persuade Germany at a very vulnerable point in time after World War I that they were the reason why, Germany was where it was at, et cetera, et cetera. And so this works in all walks of life. You look at it with Donald Trump as well with politics, right? The antagonists for all Republicans are the Democrats. The antagonists for all the Democrats are the Republicans. So when you use this kind of motivation, no matter where you're at in life, especially if you're a young man, oftentimes it can be your ex-wife, it can be your ex-girlfriend, whatever, you want to understand that there's pros and cons to this. And you have to be very, very careful about who you make the antagonist. My mistake that I made when trying to channel my darkest thoughts and using that motivation to win is that my antagonist was my family. And those are the people that I loved the most. But I wanted to prove them wrong. And so be very, very careful about who you make the antagonist. And if it's someone you truly love and deep down inside, you truly want to make happy, you cannot make them the antagonist if you want to channel this dark energy to succeed. Now, something I also realized is that when you use this kind of motivation, this is very, very good as a spark, right? To get you past this breaking point here, right? To get you from being at home, being a bum, whatever, to get you past from there and break out of that, this is very useful. Now, here's the issue. I've had a lot of friends, they reach certain success, they reach a certain milestone, right? They check off the boxes, they make their first million, they make their first 100,000, whatever it is. Then they look back and then they don't feel anything. They start questioning the meaning. They have like a, midlife crisis because they start like, dude, I have the cars, I have the money, I have the fame. I reached my goals. I have 1 million followers. I did the thing that was supposed to make me happy. But then I don't feel anything anymore. It's all gone. And this is what I realized for myself as well. Because what's the whole point in trying to succeed, making someone the antagonist, having hatred, vengeance, or trying to beat somebody else, compete against somebody, when they truly don't really matter that much to you. Like, your ex-girlfriend, she doesn't really care. She's not really paying attention. And so that's when I thought about it to myself. I was like, how stupid and how insignificant is that to try to prove somebody wrong when I got older and I realized they didn't really care. They weren't even paying attention, right? And you see this as well, something interesting. I mean, I know it's possibly a bad example, but Batman, right? He's driven by vengeance, as in the newest movie. And he wants to not help others in a way, kind of, but he really just wants to oppress criminals because he was oppressed by one. Like, he had his parents get shot. And so he wants to use that to now beat up and hurt other criminals. And he doesn't want to use guns because his parents were shot with a gun, right? And so he's using the motivation of the dark thoughts to be able to push in a direction, to get out of something and to do something, right? And use the dark side in a way. So, to recap, these are the things you can use. This is how you use it for yourself, your company, your people, and it actually has a lot of benefits to it. But you need to understand it can be very short-sighted. And it can limit you in a way, especially if you don't understand when you reach that goal, this kind of dies, okay? So this type of motivation to get you to your first initial goal is push motivation, right? Very, very powerful. One of the most powerful, actually more powerful than this side. Now, this side I didn't really understand how to channel this kind of motivation, how to channel these kind of thoughts. But this is pull motivation. And what is pull motivation? So this is a little different in the sense that pull motivation, it's driven by things like purpose, things like impact, and meaning, as a short example, right? That's what it's driven by. So you want to solve a problem, right? You want to help others. You want to, what's another one? You want to build a legacy, right? You want to have an impact, as I mentioned above. Why does this work? Because there's an unlimited amount of people to help, right? If you set your goal to help XYZ people, help 1 billion people, you might not ever reach that in your lifetime. So oftentimes you beat the person in a race. You beat the person to get to XYZ. They end up coming back to try to get you back, right? They end up realizing you were right. But then after you beat them, after you've won, then you have nothing. And so the motivation dies because the motivation was never driven by pull motivation or positive motivation, impact, purpose, meaning, right? Helping others. It was driven by the toxic side of motivation. And this can kill you. This can leave you without anything, right? Because you realize you did it all for nothing and no one cared in the first place. But this gives you fulfillment because it's driven by, it's helping others. It's driven by how do you build more schools? How do you donate more money, right? And this kind of motivation is something that oftentimes people can't accomplish in their entire life, right? For Tony Robbins, it's feeding a bunch of people, right? And so everyone has their different things, but it lets you basically collaborate or celebrate with people who matter, right? And it builds something for something, not against someone or something. Right? So you're building to help people, to help us for the positive side. So this type of motivation is going to actually give you fulfillment. My spelling is bad, so I don't know if I spelled this stuff correct. But this gives you true meaning of purpose, of fulfilling legacy, right? Because here you're like, whoa, I see the benefit that all the people are getting from my help. Like some of the biggest benefits I've gotten in my life has been through giving money away to others, giving money away to my church, giving money away to people that don't have as much as me, even though I'm not rich, but like starting to build the habits right now of giving and finding something bigger than myself, right? A large goal. So this motivation, the cons of this type of motivation is that it's very hard to access if you haven't reached your number one main goal. Whether it's 6 figures, whether it's $1 million, whether it's getting jacked, whether it's getting 1 million followers, whatever that big number one goal is when you're like, dang, I made it. That's when this type of motivation dies and you need to transition into this one. And that's where you're going to succeed here, whether it's for your family, your kids, whatever it is. The issue with this type of motivation is very hard to tap into and very hard to access if you don't have any previous success with anything. If you're broke, you have no money and you're fat, and you're just trying to have a little bit of success, it's going to be very hard to be like, oh, I want to, create my own gym franchise, or I want to create the biggest channel of personal, of fitness or whatever. It's very hard to have that kind of vision because you don't even have the confidence in yourself to even getting out of the rut you're in. And so usually this kind of motivation, the dark side, is easier to channel if you're just getting started and you just want to have a little bit of success. But once you have that and you lose it eventually, you need to transition here. That's usually why people miss it, because they don't have something bigger than themselves. And usually the things that give the most fulfillment are things that help others, right? Whether it's schools, whether it's money, whether it's time. Sometimes even it's the cheapest things, whether it's just like coaching a basketball team or helping out in your church, the things that you enjoy, right? So from here, from 0 to 1, you usually will go through negative. But from 1 to 10, you have to go through pull. And then from 10 to 100, you still stay in pull motivation. So we went over the pros and cons of each. Now let me give you a short example here. I've written down. So let's say you're in 5th grade, somebody bullies you, and now you're like, I'm going to take karate class so I can now beat up this kid, right? So a kid bullies you. That's the facts. You get bullied. Kid makes fun of you. He punches you. Now you're like, I'm going to take martial arts classes so I can beat up this kid, right? So that would be one event happened. You get bullied. It's a bully. And you choose to go this direction so you can fight back. So you can oppress the ones that oppressed you. Now, the same situation happens to kid number B. And then he says, cool, I'm going to get strong and I'm going to do karate or taekwondo, do martial arts. So that way, when I'm older, I can teach other kids so it doesn't happen to them. And so they learn how to defend themselves. Or I'm going to teach it to kids so they understand how, or I'm going to write my own book, to help parents teach their kids of, how to deal with their son or daughter getting bullied. Because my parents never taught me that. Or I'm going to help others so that this doesn't happen to them as well. Right? And ideally, you don't help others to teach how to repress them. You teach others to how to defend themselves, how to protect themselves, how to, disengage. And there's 2 ways that it can happen there's 2 things that can happen to the same person, and one person can go here, and another person can go here. And so I encourage you guys to, yes, be able to channel your darkest thoughts to win, but understand that it's only going to get you to a certain point. And if you feel like you've lost motivation, you've lost determination, you've realized that no one really cares, and you can't make antagonists in your story, the people that you love, the people that you appreciate, and then this is only going to get you so far. And you have to have meaning and have purpose in your life. Then you're going to feel way more fulfilled in your life.